All right, so today we're going to dive into this really powerful essay that asks a pretty uncomfortable question. What if our whole idea of happiness is actually built on a foundation of inequality? Let's get right into it.
I mean, what a way to start, right? The author just drops this bombshell right at the beginning. It's a statement that's designed to completely shake up our modern ideas about happiness and kind of force us to look at the real history behind the world's richest countries.
So to really get what the author is saying here, we've got to start by taking apart a pretty common myth, a story about a supposedly happy nation that, a lot of us have been told for years. You've probably heard about Bhutan, right? For the longest time, it was held up as this poster child for national contentment because of its famous gross national happiness index. But the essay points out a pretty stark reality. The data just doesn't back that up. It's actually Western European nations that are consistently at the top of the list for self-reported happiness. And this, right here, really lays out the two sides of the story. On one hand, you have this powerful myth, this image of Bhutan's perfect happiness. And on the other, you've got the cold, hard data. That first World Happiness Report was a real reality check. It showed that the people of Bhutan themselves, well, they didn't rank their own happiness nearly as high as the story would have you believe.
Okay, so with that whole myth versus reality thing in mind, let's turn to the essay's main focus, the real head-scratcher that is India.
Wow. Just look at that number. 116th. According to the World Happiness Report the author cites, that's where India lands out of 147 nations. And the essay makes a point to say that this is lower than countries dealing with incredible conflict, like Ukraine, Iraq, and even its neighbor Pakistan. So that ranking immediately makes you ask, what is going on here?
So you might be asking, how do they even measure something like happiness? Well, it comes down to these 6 things you see here. And what's really interesting is the author's point that, India's affluent class would probably score pretty high on key metrics like financial well-being and freedom. So this suggests that the low national average isn't just about poverty, it's pointing to something deeper, a massive societal divide.
And this right here, this is a really, really important piece of the puzzle. The essay argues that the reason for India's low average isn't what you'd expect. It's that the happy people aren't that much happier, then the unhappy people are miserable. It's this weird kind of compression that just pulls the entire national average way, way down.
So, to dig into this massive divide, the author takes us from this big national picture, right down to the micro level. We're talking about a place where these tensions are on display every single day. The affluent Indian home.
The essay brings up this really eye-opening story to make its point. A prosecutor in a case pointed out that a family was spending $10,000 a year on their dog. Now, the author notes that comparing what you spend on a pet to what you pay a person might seem, absurd to some. But that number, 10 grand, it just forces you to stop and think about how we decide what's valuable. And this leads the author to coin this incredibly potent phrase, purposely impoverished. The idea here is that the living conditions for domestic staff aren't just an accident or an oversight. They're almost a structural part of the whole relationship. A windowless room isn't just a bad room, it feels like an environment specifically designed to keep someone in their place.
And look, this isn't just some abstract theory. The essay points to a real, high-profile case involving the Hinduja family as a prime example. The accusations were just stunning. People allegedly working up to 18-hour days for pay that was around $8 a day. $8. It really highlights the extreme end of the exploitation being talked about.
Okay, so we've seen what happens inside the home. Now, let's go public. The author uses another super vivid scene to show how all this class stuff plays out in the open, at the 5-star hotel buffet. But before we even get to the buffet, the essay hits the middle class with this really pointed question. It kind of suggests that, hey, you might look down on the over-the-top displays of billionaires, but maybe your own public behavior isn't so different. The author paints this picture of the buffet as more than just a place to eat. It's a performance, really, a spectacle of wealth and, oddly enough, a kind of anxiety about getting your money's worth. So let's walk through what this spectacle actually looks like. First, you're openly encouraged to just eat as much as you possibly can. This creates this weird little ritual where people start with a small, polite first plate, but then come back with plates piled high. The whole thing becomes this chaotic scene, which leads to the author's main point. There is just something so vulgar about all this waste, especially when it's happening in a poor country.
But then comes the gut punch. This is where the whole thing just gets turned on its head. The author asks you, to imagine this whole scene through the eyes of a brand new waiter. What would that be like?
seeing mountains of food being thrown out, when the price of just one of those meals could be more than you make in an entire month. It completely reframes the whole thing. It's an act of, well, profound disrespect.
In all of this, the happiness stats, the dynamics in the home, the buffet spectacle, it all builds to the core question of the essay. After looking at all these pieces, we have to ask, in this complicated relationship, who is actually provoking home?
This idea just completely flips the script on a story we hear all the time. You know, the one where the rich subsidize the poor through jobs and taxes. But the essay says, hold on a second. Isn't it also true that the poor are subsidizing the rich? That the comfortable lifestyles of the wealthy are only possible because of the incredibly low wages paid to the people who work for them? It's a two-way street. In this quote, man, it just perfectly captures the old unspoken rules. The idea was that the poor could be in these wealthy spaces, but they had to be invisible. They had to just blend into the background. Their job was to make life comfortable, but not to be seen or heard.
But here's the thing, that unspoken agreement, it's starting to crumble. The essay points out that domestic staff aren't just staying in the kitchen anymore. They're sitting on the sofa, they're occupying the space, and that simple act of just being visible, of claiming a right to exist in that space, is what's creating this new tension, this discomfort.
And that leaves us right here, with the big, central question that this whole piece has been leading up to. Is the real provocation the flaunting of unbelievable wealth in the face of deep poverty? Or is it the refusal of the poor to just stay invisible anymore? The author leaves us with that to think about, really forcing us to question our own ideas about class, comfort, and what it even means to provoke someone.